the freaking hell? What's the old bike?
Hello and welcome. In this video I will introduce you to my bicycles and tell you a bit about them. First, however, I have a request, and it's important. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it drives me crazy. See, while it's still winter in the northern hemisphere and spring can seem an eternity away, spring cleaning is closer than it seems. People will be going through their garages, basements and sheds and make room for new stuff. A whole lot of old stuff will be thrown out to get recycled or end up in landfills. So here's my request. Do not throw out your old bicycles, regardless of condition.
Well, what do you want me to do with the damn old thing?
Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to hold on to them. All I'm asking is that you don't put them in a garbage bin or even drive them to the transfer station to get recycled. There's a much better way of dealing with old bicycles, regardless of whether they're functional or not. Who wants an old bike if it's not just old but also broken, you might ask? Who wants my old piece of junk?
I want a brand new bike.
Believe it or not, many of us are into cycling but have a very small budget to do it on. There's always someone who would love to ride your old bike.
I sure like to ride.
Once it's been hauled to the landfill or metal recycling, that possibility is gone forever. You can make a real difference to someone by donating your bike to charity. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how to do that in your city or town, but Google will probably have a suggestion to you. Unless, of course, you live in Edmonton, Alberta. In Edmonton, Bike Edmonton, a non-profit that has been operating in the city since 1980, formerly under the name Edmonton Bicycle Commuters Society, can help you out. Bike Edmonton has 2 volunteer-run shops that transform old bicycles, just like the one you need to get rid of, into well-tuned bikes that even people on a low income can afford to buy. Think about it. Your old bike can become someone's transportation to work or school, or their way to get exercise during a pandemic that has perhaps robbed them of their budget for a new bike.
Hey-oh! I need a bicycle!
Who would want my old piece of junk, you might ask? It's outdated, heavy, and ugly, right? The truth is that there are many older bikes that can rival anything that is being sold today when it comes to a good ride. Bicycle technology is over 100 years old, and it has been perfected decades ago. A bike from the 1980s, in good condition, rides just about as good as a brand new one. A few grams more weight or old-style friction shifters on a 6-speed freewheel are not deal breakers for serious riders, except perhaps if they're into racing, where even the smallest advantage can mean the difference between winning and losing. The bicycle industry is doing a great job at convincing everyone that they need the latest technology, while generally neglecting the kind of clientele that only needs their bikes for transportation and recreational riding. Bikes from the 1980s and 90s are perfect for that, as they are simple and sturdy, often with indestructible steel frames that are easily fitted with racks and fenders. At community bike shops, such as the ones Bike Edmonton runs, your bike will be assessed and probably repaired. Even those that are completely beyond repair usually have some parts that can be salvaged. They get stripped to do just that. The result are many affordable bikes that make a real difference to someone's life.
You want me to donate my old Bianchi?
Now, I'm not asking you to give away your high-end vintage Colnago or anything like that. If your bike is worth real money, you may want to put it on eBay or Kijiji. But if this doesn't even seem worth the hassle, please donate your old bike to charity. Now, with this out of the way, let's head outside to my shed where 1980s bikes rule. I just love the simplicity of those bikes and how they have steel or chromoly frames that are sturdy enough to last a lifetime, but flexible enough to give you a smooth ride without any suspension. Today you pay top dollar for a lugged custom frame. Until the late 1980s, this was the standard. I'll see you outside. See what you're looking at right now, it's my winter bike. Not too long ago, I rebuilt this. 9 years ago, the plan for this bike was to strip it for parts. This is at a community bike shop, and it's mostly because people aren't that much into bikes from the 1980s. They want newer stuff. Well, there was nothing wrong with the frame. There were still a lot of good parts on there. Eventually, I ended up buying this thing for myself after fixing it to be sold. It was when I tried it for a test ride that I found that this bike was way more comfortable than what I was riding at the time, which was a higher end late 1990s Raleigh mountain bike. So a really nice bike actually, but this just fit me better. 9 years later, that is still one of my favorite bikes, and you're looking at it now, it's orange. Before being this color it was copper, and before being copper it was some oddball beige that I painted. I painted this bike 3 times. See, I'm going through a learning process with this too. Last year I painted it with this orange Chevrolet engine enamel, and that is the paint that is actually almost as durable as something they would sell you on a new bike. It's not powder coating, but it can withstand a little bit of scuffing, and I'm really happy with it. But it took me time to learn this. It took some experimenting, and not all my bikes that I painted looked like this one right off the bat. So when you throw out a bike to be never ridden again, somebody's missing out on it in a way somewhere. So once again, I repeat it, don't throw them out, donate them.
The Bianchi.
This is my road bike that I built last winter. I talked about last summer. Yeah, it's got steel wheels, it's got steel pedals. Nothing really super high end, but some of the parts on this bike are pretty nice. I put new brakes on there. It is it is called Bianchi in this house, but it is actually, the frame is a Steve Bauer, which was a decent bike here in Canada. Yeah, guess what I do with this thing? There's my Brooks. Yeah, well, this bike looks nice enough to be confused with a piece of jewelry. It's actually just something I enjoy riding. I built it myself. It's not the prettiest bike, but that yellow paint is also engine enamel. It's on there really solid, it's nice and hard. There were a few places where I goofed. I'm not perfect, I make mistakes. I'll show you. You see this? There's a braze on there, and before, because the shape, the way it's shaped there, I thought it was shaped so that the clamp would fit this, and as you can see, it slid a little bit over time, and that's where I have to touch up the paint. Horrible. It doesn't do a thing when you're riding this bike. It rides just as good as before. It's just a pleasure to ride this thing. And again, when I first picked up this frame, our shop manager at the bike shop basically said, well, this frame we're not rebuilding just to take it outside to the scrap pile and make sure you jump on it so that nobody gets the chance to ever rebuild this again, because it was suspected that there was a problem with it. Well, I asked, instead of jumping on it, can I get it out of here? I'd like to get into some brazing and stuff, and I can use the scrap to practice with and that. And what I ended up doing is carefully inspecting this frame and finding that there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, and then I built this bike out of it. See, again, a piece of scrap was rescued. It's now a usable road bike. I mean, I go crazy with this thing. There's a shortage of bikes these days because people are starting to appreciate bikes more because they can do their exercise outdoors now.
Bike 3, BRC.
Alright, wanted to show you another bike that I'm really grateful for, because somebody a few years ago, I think that was about 3 years ago, somebody didn't throw this out, even though it was taking up space. It was taking up space in somebody's garage, collecting dust, didn't do nothing. You notice something about that? You see how clean all this is? This is a bike from the late 1970s. It is a beautiful bicycle, it's fun to ride, and that's the point. Even this is now original. It's a BRC Campus. I had this bike already advertised for sale last fall. In the fall, it's pretty hard to sell a bicycle, and my heart wasn't really into selling this bike because I'm still attached to it in a way. I'm not a collector, believe it or not, but this bike is a whole lot of fun to ride, and somebody saw the value in it, even though they didn't use it for themselves, to pass it on to somebody who could enjoy it. And that somebody was me for the past 3 years or so. Yeah, I'm gonna make damn sure that somebody who's really gonna benefit from this bike is gonna get this, unless I decide to keep it for another summer, another 2. I don't know.
And he just loves his touring bike.
Okay, next bike I'm showing you, my beautiful, formerly pink Norco Sasquatch. That's my touring bike, folks. It doesn't look like much now, does it? This is the bike that I first took across Central America on its first big tour in 2013. Then in 2017 I went from coast to coast across Canada, over 9,400 kilometers in one trip. Rear tire is old, got some cracks on it there already. Yeah, I know it needs to be changed eventually, but you know what, most of this isn't structural, so you can still get some bang out of it. What else is there to say? My Brooks B17. See, it's all shiny, it's like way beyond broken in. Yeah, my touring bike is now at the point where it definitely needs a little bit of TLC, but what it needs even more is a new challenge. We need to get through this pandemic and then go on a big trip somewhere in a faraway country, loaded with camping gear and all the stuff that you might need on a bike tour. Right now, we're winter in Edmonton and we're not going anywhere. But again, somebody got rid of this bike because they didn't ride it anymore. It was an old bike for them. I managed to pick that up for cheap, rebuild it, and there's 9 years of good use out of this bike. And if you're watching my series Bicycle Touring Talk, Destination Central America, there's a pink bike that I'm riding in that series, and that is the bike that you see behind me. It's just gone through a couple of overhauls since, and it is now dark gray. This is actually a hammered finish paint from Rust-Oleum, and it took awful long to harden, but it's okay now, and I'll still get a few years out of this paint job because it's probably the best one this bike has had since I've had it.
Well, here's a project for you.
This is an old bicycle frame from a Bianchi bike around the 1980s. Don't know if it's early 80s, late 80s. That's because all I have is the frame. It is definitely not the high-end kind that was made in Italy for racing. This is a mid-range kind of bike, but it's still a very nice frame. You probably already noticed there's a little problem here. There's a lug. The head tube is cracked to the point where you cannot fix this just by applying some more metal or weld it. See, if this was left, it would crack right all the way through and the frame would separate. It's really amazing, and it makes me wonder what might have caused this. But again, to stick with the theme of this video, I'm not going to throw this out. Our local bike shop did. That's how I got it. See, I like a good challenge like that. A bicycle that is basically toast, but I can think of a way to fix it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look this up online. Got to take some measurements with the good old vernier caliper, obviously, and then I'm going to order the parts for this. A head tube. Need obviously the lug between the head tube and the down tube. Like, it's almost like building a frame. That's kind of what I want to get into though. So I find this is the opportunity for me to do a little bit of experimenting with the brazing. Worst case scenario, this doesn't turn out, I'll have a bike that'll run crooked, or I'll have an attempt of something and it didn't work out. Oh well, big deal. But you can almost be sure that there'll be some kind of revelation in that, and that's how you learn. So if you have an old bike that you just need to get out of the way, there are people out there who like to learn about bikes and who would just take that and they would have a ball to try and recondition this. Instead of bringing it to the dump, bring it to somewhere where people will make use of it as a bicycle, either to rebuild it. And if it's a case like this, see this frame, all I got from it was the frame. Guess what they did with it? They took off all the parts that were usable, and on the Bianchi bike, you can bet that there are a lot of good usable parts on there that have been put onto another bike that perhaps had a perfectly good frame, but somebody rode the hell out of it and all the parts were out of whack. So, you know, you can do a lot with these old bikes, whether they are totally broken or not. Some of them will end up in the scrap heap, no doubt about it. But from the technology standpoint, there's nothing wrong with older bicycles. They are simple, which is beautiful, and it's the ideal way for somebody to learn about bicycles. As you may have noticed, all I ride is old bikes from the 1980s, and they work beautifully. I don't have any ambition to go beyond that because there's absolutely no need for it. These bikes, they'll outlast anything that you'll see in the store today. Yeah, by the way, if you want to know how this turns out, just hit the damn button. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining me on this channel. I finally hit 500 subscribers, and I owe it to all of you, subscribed or not. So thank you for all the support. How do I owe anyone who didn't subscribe? Every minute someone watches this channel, it helps its ranking with the almighty algorithm. According to the statistics, about 2/3 of my watch time comes from people who haven't subscribed yet. Okay, if you're part of those 2/3, you can make a huge difference to this channel by simply clicking the subscribe button. There's no commitment at all, but it tells YouTube that this channel has your support.
Once we grow to 1,000 subscribers, it will open the doors to more tools that allows for even better content.
Better content now.
So, please consider it. Not so sure yet? Why not watch another of my videos? There are 2 suggestions for you right now, right here on the screen. I'll see you again soon.